Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 15th of November 2021. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So, I came across this chart on Twitter the other day from Data Always on Twitter here, showing, I guess, a crazy metric around EIP 1559, and you can see on the chart here that 1559 has now burned more tokens than Ethereum miners hold. So more ETH has been burned than the ETH held by miners on Ethereum, which is crazy. You can see here in the blue, miners hold around 0.85 million ETH, I would say. So 850,000 ETH, and we have burned much more than that. It seems we've burned. 800, oh wait, no. We've burned not much more than that. Sorry, the chart kind of like threw me off there. We've burned 893,000. So I guess what, a 40-ish thousand more, which is crazy, right? Like, I mean, miners have always been lauded as these kind of like group that needs to sell ETH, right? And put sell pressure on ETH because they need to sell to cover their ongoing costs like electricity and hardware maintenance and just other ongoing running costs. And of course, everyone's getting really bullish because you have the merge coming, which reduces this, which I'll talk about in a sec. There's another tweet that I want to talk about with regards to that. But I think this is just like, I mean, it's so awesome to see kind of like this put in context, because we always say, oh yeah, 900,000 ETH or whatever has been burned, but and then you kind of like, you can put a dollar value to that, which is obviously in the billions of dollars. But once you contextualize it and actually kind of like show the kind of real pressure this is having on the market in terms of like taking supply off the market and offsetting even the supply that miners have to sell. I mean, they have to sell to cover costs. There's no way around that. But instead of them getting kind of like all the fees now, most of them are being burned. They've only got the block reward to sell, which is still kind of like quite high. I mean, on ETH1, on the proof of work chain, it's still about 4.5% new ETH a year. And that's millions of ETH a year that's still being sold. But of course, we're burning, if you annualize it out, we're burning millions of ETH as well. So the net reduction is actually being quite insane so far. And that's Tetranode's tweet here, where he kind of like points out that the net reduction has been 65% since 1559 went live. And if you go to the monthly, if you click 1 month here on the Watch the Burn site and go to like 30 days, it'll show the last 30 days. We've burned 85%. So we've got a net reduction of 85%, which means that only 15% of new ETH has been issued from the miners, because we've offset the rest of it through a burn. And obviously we had those deflationary days, and we had that one deflationary week as well. So absolutely crazy amounts of ETH being burned here. And I mean, if I go to the Watch the Burn website here, once it kind of like loads up, you can see what I mean. Hopefully you can see it. I'm not sure. My camera's not blocking it. Okay, if you go see 1 month, this shows the last 30 days. You can see a net reduction of 85%. So we burned 342,000 ETH over the last 30 days, and there were 400,000 ETH worth of rewards that were paid out to miners, of course, as the block reward. And then net issuance is only 59,000 ETH. So basically that means a net reduction of 85%, which is absolutely insane, considering that once we go through with the merge, and that's what I said here on Tetranode's kind of tweet, I said that 1559 is only the appetizer, the merge is the main course. When we go through with the merge, this new issuance drops down from 4.5% to around 0.65%, which is, I think, about 85%. The triple halvening kind of term was coined about it being 90%, but as more ETH gets staked, the issuance goes up over time as well. So it's about an 85% reduction. But once that goes through, we're going to be negative issuance all the time, which is absolutely crazy. I mean, and that's, as I've said before, that's real sell pressure from miners. They have to sell. There's no kind of like, I mean, they can stockpile ETH, of course, and the ETH that they get as part of kind of like on top of the profit, basically, the profit that they get. But like they have like this baseline running cost that they have to pay for. Whereas with stakers, I mean, not only do we get that massive issue introduction when we move to proof of stake after the merge, but stakers don't have these massive ongoing costs. You could say that they've got the biggest cost they've got is selling for taxes, because obviously staking income or yield is taxed as income tax, depending where you are. So I mean, obviously there's a lot of stakers in the US and Europe, and there's income tax there for mining and staking. But there are other places where it may not be taxed, right? Depending on where you are. But we can assume that the majority are going to be taxed as if it was income. So we could say you can just take a flat line, maybe 30%, because a lot of these are going to be businesses as well. So you can take like a flat line outline. I don't know what the corporate tax rate is in the US. Actually, in Australia, it's 30%. So I'm just going to take 30%. So you can safely assume that at least 30% will have to be sold to cover for taxes. But then the running costs are basically non-existent. So the only other reason really to sell is to take profits. And really, I mean, how often are people going to be doing that, right? And even if they do, the sell pressure is going to be like way, way, way less than what it is today. So we're really going to have this massive kind of like supply shock going on once the merge happens. And I think we're already having it, to be honest. I've seen a lot of traders comment about ETH's recent price action on Twitter, saying they don't understand how ETH can just like keep trending up like it has over the past, I guess, couple of months. There's no kind of like, I mean, it's trending up, of course, but it's not like pumping like really, really, really hard, or say not going up too fast. It just seems to be trending up over time. And I would argue that it's definitely got a lot to do with the 1559 kind of burn mechanism for the reasons I've outlined previously, but also for the simple reason that it's a huge narrative driver, of course, and also the ETH being burned is ETH being a lot of it is kind of like ETH being bought off the market as well, because the people that are paying the gas fees on Ethereum right now, the high gas fees, they're probably two distinct groups. There's the kind of like whales, which can afford to use the network, and they do a lot of things on the network. And then there's the kind of like people extracting value out of block space via MEV. Those would be the two distinct groups, and they do overlap. There's a Venn diagram there, of course. But these groups are going to have to keep funding their operations by buying new ETH. They don't have unlimited ETH to use, right? They're going to have to buy ETH from the market, acquire it in some way, whether that's through MEV or whether that's through buying it for fiat on exchanges, with fiat on exchanges or whatever. They're still acquiring ETH. And then what happens to that ETH that they're acquiring? It gets burned. So it literally gets taken out of circulation forever. So this isn't just like ETH that's been sitting in cold storage being burned. It's effectively removing active ETH from the supply, which is even more bullish, because when you look at supply dynamics, you can see, okay, well, there's a circulating supply of ETH of like 116 million ETH or something like that. But then you have to break that down, like how much is locked in smart contracts, how much hasn't moved for a very long period of time, how much is in staking, how much is in DeFi, how much is here, how much is there, obviously how much has been burned, and then you can get the real kind of like dynamic of how much is in like an active supply. And I think it's safe to say that we're burning a lot of the active supply. It's not just burning supply that wasn't already active. Some of it will be, of course. There'll be some that is sat in cold storage for a bit, then a transaction happens and it burns some ETH. But I think the majority of it is definitely a lot of MEV, arbitrage, whale transactions, and that's all kind of like active ETH. It's already kind of like been in the market, but now we're burning it instead of kind of like it just sloshing around. So, I mean, that's just, I don't know. I think that explains it. I think that's why traders are seeing this and being confused by it, because they're looking at it from just a pure technical analysis or chart perspective. They're not kind of like thinking too deeply about, some of them are, but for the majority that I've seen, they're not thinking too deeply about how ETH's kind of like supply dynamics have drastically changed with 1559, and they're going to change even more with the merge, which a lot of people are playing a trade on right now. As we approach the merge, the hype, the speculation is going to get really, really crazy, because, funny enough, like you guys know, because I talk about it all the time, but the kind of like triple halvening or that massive issuance reduction with the merge, not many people know about that. And for those who do know about that, most people don't actually understand how much of a reduction it is. Just like that, most people didn't understand how much ETH was actually going to be burned because of all the fee revenue being generated by the network. So, I mean, I guess the TLDR of my little spiel there about 1559 and supply dynamics in general is that, buying and holding ETH over the long term seems like a no-brainer to me. Obviously it's not investment advice, but, that's what I do all the time. It's why I'm still buying ETH now. People always ask me, like, why are you buying ETH, man? Like, you bought, like, ages ago. You bought it, like, $100 or even less than that. And I'm like, well, that doesn't matter. Like, it's just all relative, right? Back then, I didn't have as much money to buy as I do today because just the way it kind of like worked out. I wish I could buy all the ETH that I'm buying today at $100, but that's just not how it works. So that's why I still buy every day and kind of like buy those big dips as well when I can. Because as I've said before, I truly believe ETH has a very clear path to $100,000 at least in kind of like the next kind of, I guess, 5 to 10 years, you could say. Maybe it could happen sooner than that. I don't know. Things could get crazy with this coming supply shock, especially because it's not just a scarcity tactic. It's also demand meeting that supply shock with the demand to use the Ethereum network and demand to do everything on the Ethereum network. So yeah, I mean, if that doesn't make you bullish, I don't know what will, but I'm sure you guys are already on this train with me. But I think it's good to revisit these sorts of things from time to time. It's something that I haven't spoken about in a little while on the refuel, and I think it's just something to keep in mind as we progress through both kind of like the layer 2 rollout, which will add even more fee pressure to layer 1, and then also the kind of like merge that's happening with the issuance reduction. and all the other kind of like supply sinks that are here, and some that are coming in the future for ETH as we progress through Ethereum's adoption. And one last thing on 1559 is that the first contract to burn 100 ETH happened the other day. So this is OpenSea. It's burned 100,000 ETH, I should say. Sorry. It is the first contract ever to burn this much ETH. Pretty obvious. I mean, OpenSea NFTs had an absolutely crazy September, October. It slowed down a bit in November. I mean, it slowed down a lot in November. But yeah, September, October were pretty crazy. But then you can see, like, following close behind is ETH transfers, so just regular ETH transfers, which is a no-brainer there. Uniswap V2 and V3 and Tether. And then, I mean, you can go to the leaderboard and check out kind of like all the gas guzzlers. If I go to the leaderboard here, actually, I'll show you really quickly. I love this leaderboard. It's really easy to see everything. But essentially, you can go all... And you can see, like, what the top gas kind of, like, guzzlers are. I mean, it's funny seeing the Metamask swap router be here, because I think a lot of people, I mean, even it's over the kind of, like, the last 7 days, a lot of people are speculating on the Mask token, and to get the Mask token to an airdrop, people are speculating that you can only do so through using Metamask's swap feature. But you can see, like, how much, I mean, look at Axie Infinity's Ronin bridge. This is the bridge going in and out of their sidechain. It's crazy to see that they've burned 15,500 ETH just from that bridge. And then, I mean, the other stuff isn't surprising to me. USDC, I mean, stable coins, obviously, decentralized exchanges, aggregators like 1inch, SHIB. I mean, I spoke about this the other day. Strong block. I have no idea what this is, but that's funny. New contracts being deployed. 8,000 ETH has been burned with just new contracts being deployed. So, I mean, yeah, looking through this whole list here, gives you a really, really interesting glimpse into kind of like how much ETH is being burned by each party. Wintermute. I mean, Wintermute is a market maker, massive market maker within DeFi. They've burned 2,200 ETH just on their own over all time. So, pretty crazy when you look at it like that. But yeah, enough about 1559. On to some other different topics today. So, Anish from Paradigm has built a new faucet for test networks. So Ropsten, Kovan, Gorley, and Optimism on Kovan now can be funded via faucet.paradigm.xyz. So this faucet will drip out 5 ETH, 5 wrapped ETH, 5,000 DAI, and 5 ERC 721 NFTs. No need to tweet your address. You just sign in with Twitter instead to do this. Now, this obviously just applies to developers. This is not real tokens. These are testnet tokens. They're worth nothing. So don't get your hopes up. You're not going to get 5 ETH for free, unfortunately. But yeah, if you're a developer, definitely check this out. And not even just a developer. If you're someone who wants to test things on a testnet, like maybe there's apps on there that, new releases of apps on a testnet that's not a mainnet yet, and you're a really big fan of that app, then you could definitely use this as well. So this is actually pretty cool because it's historically been quite hard to source testnet funds in a kind of like efficient way. You would have to like ask on Twitter, or there'd be some portals here and there to get some, but this is just kind of like putting it all in one place, which is really, really awesome. So yeah, developer or not, definitely check this out. You may find some use for it, that's for sure. So Hayden from Uniswap announced that Uniswap governance has approved a new 0.01% fee tier for Uniswap V3. Now, I believe this is the lowest fee tier in any AMM. I think Curve is 0.04% or something like that for stablecoin swaps. So obviously this is going to be the lowest kind of like tier for stablecoin swaps, and it's going to make it much cheaper to swap stablecoins on Uniswap V3 rather than Curve, depending on the liquidity and stuff like that as well. But the funny thing is, I always thought kind of like stablecoin swaps were a race to the bottom in terms of fees, because the reason the fees can be lower and much, much lower on stablecoin swaps is because you don't have impermanent loss unless one of the stablecoins fails, for example. But in the normal case, you don't have any impermanent loss because they're both worth $1, right? Whereas with a volatile pair such as say you pair with ETH USDC, you will suffer impermanent loss over time in either direction. So you're compensated for that by higher trading fees, by the fee tier being higher here. Now, 0.01% on stablecoin swaps is fine. I mean, it's still profitable to, especially if, I mean, you're kind of like betting on there being a lot of volume going through this sort of stuff. Like you make up for the lower fees with more volume to make it worthwhile for people to put their stablecoins in here in the first place. But, even still, like, you don't suffer impermanent loss by doing this. So it's still something that's very attractive. But I don't know, like, can it go lower than this? Can we get like 0.005% on the stable swaps? Can it get to literally like, I don't think it can get to 0%. But I think it can get like really, really low. And what does that mean for actual stablecoin aggregators like Curve and kind of like MStable and stuff like that? Maybe it means that they have to lower their fees as well. I don't know. I've always seen stablecoin swaps as like a kind of race to the bottom in terms of fees, because it just doesn't make sense for them to be be high, considering stablecoin swaps is one of the most popular things that people do on Ethereum, in crypto in general. And the fact is that the fee doesn't need to be that high for the reasons I outlined. So cool to see this. I'm gonna monitor the metrics around it. We'll see what how much usage this gets over Curve. Curve obviously has a lot of liquidity in there. Curve has a lot of integrations, network effects. Curve also has liquidity mining, I believe. It still has CRV being paid out to people. They have their way to lock up their token and earn extra yield to the gauges and stuff like that. Whereas Uniswap doesn't have that. I mean, it could if governance voted for it, but it doesn't have that right now. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see kind of like how that shakes out, over time. All right, so on Optimism, so last Friday, I believe, I think I mentioned this on the Refuel, Optimism's OVM 2.0 upgrade went live, which means that they are now fully EVM compatible, not just EVM equivalent. And they also have a new form that projects can fill out to get onboarded onto the optimistic Ethereum network. And you can see here in the Discord channel, Optimism's Discord channel, there is a bunch of announcements being made with protocols being onboarded or being whitelisted to the protocol. So you can see some of your favorites. Gnosis Safe is now on there as being whitelisted. I shouldn't say he's on there yet. Whitelisted just means that they can deploy their contracts and get that all set up, which they will do over time. Obviously, it takes longer to do this depending on the project. But other favorites include Curve, you got Connect, Synapse, UMA, DHedge, a few others there I don't know of, Optimistic Bunnies, OptiPunks, probably some forks of some NFT projects, Poly Network, Flux Protocol. But, this was taken just the other day, so I think a couple of days ago, so I'm assuming there's more since then. But, this is it. I know I said that I hope that Optimism removed their whitelist once they did the OVM 2.0 upgrade. But if they're whitelisting projects this quickly, then maybe it doesn't matter that they don't remove the whitelist straight away. Obviously, maybe it hasn't happened yet, and we actually probably won't know, depending. But they might. I don't know if they'll do this or not. I don't know if there's actually a framework in place for them to not whitelist projects that they believe to be scams. Because if they do that, then it gets a kind of a bit murky. But I don't know. I haven't looked into that. But it feels like that they're whitelisting projects really, really quickly here. And that's what you want to see. I want to see more projects on Arbitrum and Optimism as the EVM compatible rollups right now. But I also want to see liquidity mining programs on here to get users to actually kind of go there, right? Not just with the native token. I'm sure there's going to be an ARB and OP token eventually, but until that happens, I think these projects will have a chance to do this and run it through their governance or kind of just do it in order to get more users using these sorts of things. But just generally, even without liquidity mining, I think the more projects on there, the more users we're going to see anyway. And hopefully there's bridges coming from the centralized exchanges too. I don't know. The thing is, I was saying this in the Discord channel today. I see very clearly the path towards Ethereum scaling via rollups, but it's going to require patience. And this is the problem with a lot, the market more generally, is that the market doesn't like waiting, right? The market wants things to happen really quickly. So that's why you see a lot of people latching onto these things that are ready today, quote unquote ready today, in terms of scaling, right? They have cheaper fees, but they've just sacrificed decentralization and security to achieve that. Whereas doing it the proper way, retaining decentralization, retaining security, scaling in a very sustainable way, is a marathon. It is not a sprint, and it's going to take much longer than people would like. But I'm 100% confident that that's the right way to do it, but it's the long game. So, if you're interested in the long game, then these sorts of things, you just have to wait, and you just have to be prepared to wait for these things to kind of play out. I know I see some people saying sometimes, Optimism and Arbitrum, there's not much to do on there. We're still waiting on a money market on Arbitrum, all this sort of stuff. And I get that. I get that it's frustrating being an early adopter and stuff like that, but that's the kind of thing that happens when you're an early adopter. That's why you get all the opportunities as an early user and kind of being early to the technology. You get to invest early, you get to be early to these things, you get all the really sweet airdrops. And I was thinking about this the other day. People want mass adoption to happen really quickly, but at the same time, I don't know if people realize that means their airdrops are going to near zero. Because if you think about it, say with the ENS airdrop, there was only 140,000 ENS names actually registered to an address, right? Where it was actually tied to an address. Could you imagine if we had already onboarded 100 million people and there were 100 million people with an ENS address? Your airdrop would have been worth nothing. It wouldn't even be able to cover the gas if you did it kind of if you split up the airdrop equally there. And even if its valuation was a lot higher because there was more people in the ecosystem, its valuation wouldn't match the that's a 1000x increase on the amount of on the amount of kind of like airdrop recipients. It wouldn't have been 1000x what it is when it opened at. It opened at like, it went to like, I think it went to almost $10 billion fully diluted. I'm sorry guys, but it's not going to trillions of dollars in market cap. So when you look at airdrops in general, I mean, that's the kind of like reward for being super early. Like, especially with the other protocols that have even less users than ENS, the ones that only have like 10,000 recipients for the airdrop. That's like nothing. That's why the airdrops are so big. It's got nothing to do with the fact that kind of like crypto democratizes access to these things and kind of like does unique things like airdrops. The reason they're worth so much per user is because of the fact there's not many users yet. And, you should see that as a blessing, not a curse. And that's the way I see it. That's how I kind of like have all the patience that I have. Sometimes it's annoying for people that I'm so patient with things. I know people sometimes get angry at me and be like, come on, man, like this has taken way longer than we expected. What, aren't you a bit frustrated? And I'm simply not. I'm simply not frustrated. I'm playing the long game. I am not in any kind of like state where I need things to kind of like happen right now. And I've always been like that. I honestly, even throughout all the bear market, I never kind of like wanted things to speed up. Like even waiting for like the market to turn hot again, I don't remember ever being like, oh, I hope this, I want this to happen right now. God, I'm really annoyed about this. It was never like that. For me, it was like, I know that the market's going to go hot again. I know it's going to come roaring back. I know that this technology is going to kind of change the world. It's just waiting for it to happen. And, you look back and then you kind of like realize how quickly it actually happened. Obviously living day to day can feel slower, but looking back, you kind of see how quickly it happens relative to kind of like everything else. So yeah, but anyway, cool to see this from Optimism here. Moving on, so Polynya had a great tweet now that Optimism has upgraded to OVM 2.0. You can see that they said, now that we have an EVM equivalent rollup, direct comparisons for a Uniswap v3 trade. On Ethereum, it costs 110,000 gas. On optimistic Ethereum, it only costs 6,200 gas. So that's a huge kind of like reduction in gas costs, and not 90% plus reduction in gas costs. And then Polynya notes saying that the above numbers are L1 gas and L2 gas is less than 0.01%. And call data compression could potentially get this down to 600 gas, which means that right now there's not much compression going on with the transactions at these rollups. And this is what I've said before about how these rollups are an iterative thing. It's not just like they've just launched and that's it, like that's done. They've washed their hands with it, have at it. No, not at all. And getting it down to 600 gas with call data compression is a massive improvement. That would mean that you would get to basically the 10 cents per transaction kind of like area, based on current gas prices. And the call data part of the transaction is the part that can't actually be avoided. That's the L1 gas part. So that's why, and that can't actually be amortized. It has to be compressed to get it down. By amortized, they mean that the L2 transaction fees that aren't part of the call data, the kind of like sequencer fees, they can be amortized and spread out across users. But the call data, the actual L1 gas fees cannot, because obviously, that has to pay to L1, which is very expensive, but you can compress that. You can compress that down to, potentially 600 gas. And I think that Calvin here from Optimistic Ethereum actually detailed about how, they're looking into the compressing things. And one of the nice things about their new fraud-proof design, which is still a work in progress, but coming along nicely, is that they can compress aggressively with whatever convoluted compression mechanism that you want to use and don't need to decompress on-chain. So that could be a reality. 600 gas per Uniswap trade, which, as I said, that's like 10 cents for a Uniswap trade. No one's kind of complaining about 10 cents, that's for sure. So yeah, I mean, this is just awesome to see these comparisons, these number comparisons here, and awesome to see like how much more scalability is yet to come, and how early we still are in the L2 ecosystem. And as I was saying before, patience, guys. It's all coming. It's all coming in waves. We've got a lot to look forward to as Ethereans. There's no need to rush. I know that the market feels like, and the market kind of like, I guess, makes you feel like there's a need to rush. There is, to an extent, in that you may feel the need to rush because the competition is like gaining on you. But at the same time, as I've said before, I really do think we're still like years away from mass adoption. And by mass adoption, I mean onboarding millions of users like a day sort of thing, or like a week. I really don't think we're there yet. And it doesn't matter how much scalability we have right now. It's actually overkill for a lot of these chains. To have that much scalability. Some of them are hitting their limits already. Like I saw the Ronin sidechain today, which is an EVM sidechain that powers the Axie Infinity network, that I think fell over because it reached capacity. That's because it is based on kind of like a sidechain design with the EVM. It is not inherently very scalable. They need to get onto a roll up. Hopefully they do eventually. I know it's a big ecosystem, so it might be hard to do that. But as a kind of like a whole, as like the whole crypto ecosystem, we're just not there at the mass adoption phase yet. There's pockets that have a lot of usage, but we have time to scale, I believe, and we should do it right. We shouldn't cut corners. We shouldn't take shortcuts just for the sake of scaling now when we don't have the demand to meet it. Like, I know L1 Ethereum has a lot of demand and people want to use these L2s, but Optimism and Arbitrum aren't even kind of like anywhere near capacity. They've still got their training wheels on because we haven't hit those limits yet. So from that point of view, you can see that there's just not that much demand just yet. There will be. And you may say, oh, well, this demand's gone to the other networks. It has not. It has not gone to the other networks. I've checked the other networks, guys. Like, most of them have like hardly any usage. And the usage that they do have, I mean, relative to Ethereum, and the usage that they do have is all incentivized as well, which isn't a bad thing. But when you look at it from that point of view, you can kind of see that it's just like the same kind of money, same kind of users sloshing around. And there's not many new users coming on board. Like, don't get me wrong, there are new users coming, but it's more like, I don't even know if it's 100,000 new users a week. I would kind of like be skeptical of that. It's probably like less than 100,000 new users a week onboarding, when mass adoption is going to look like millions of users kind of like onboarding a week. Wow. And it'll kind of like happen overnight. We'll be blindsided by it. So we've got time to scale, and I think we should do it right, which the L2 teams are doing, which I really, really respect and appreciate, of course. All right, speaking of the L2 teams, so Argent has released their first StarkNet wallet called ArgentX. Now, this is for developers to play around with. You cannot use this or anything unless you're kind of like familiar with the developer tools. You have to build this locally, I believe. But yeah, I mean, as I said before, Argent is going to be supporting StarkNet and ZK Sync, and then they're going to be supporting other L2s as well. They've been unfortunately hit hard by the high L1 gas cost, because creating a smart contract wallet with Argent is very, very expensive to do on L1. It's hundreds of dollars of gas fees. On L2, it's much less. I think on Optimism in its current state, the cost is like $10 or something like that, which obviously is still not, super cheap, but on StarkNet and on ZK Sync should actually be cheaper than that. Sorry, I don't think that was for Argent. I think it was for Gnosis. So Gnosis Safe cost about $10 to $20 on, I believe, Optimism or Arbitrum. One of the two, but those costs are going to come way down over time. And if we can get it to a point where it costs like less than $1 to create like a fully fledged smart contract wallet, then that's going to be awesome for users. And we can probably get it cheaper than that, but I'm talking, short to medium term rather than very long term. But the plan's still the same, guys. Like, very long term, when we have the shards and statelessness and everything like that, these costs are going to be basically negligible, and they're going to be low enough for the operators to cover them themselves. And basically it's going to be kind of like free for users, I believe. So, massive update out of Metamask and Ledger over the weekend. So, Metamask announced that they've partnered with Ledger to improve the experience for customers. Now, for those of you who have been using your Ledger devices with Metamask for the past few months, will have run into a ton of issues around connectivity. It's just not because of Chrome, because whenever Chrome updates their browser, they seem to break Metamask and Ledger integration. Well, no more. As I said, Metamask and Ledger have worked together to fix these issues caused by browser updates on Chromium browsers such as Chrome, of course. And if you update your Metamask wallet extension to v10.5.0 plus your Ledger firmware, then you'll all be good to go. So you can see here in this blog post, basically more details about this and kind of like what the partnership, I mean, it's a long-lived partnership as well. So it's going to be basically them working together to make sure that this keeps working and doesn't keep breaking. I mean, this was obviously a thing that a lot of users kind of suffered from, unfortunately, and a lot of users kind of had a hard time with, and it turned users off using hardware wallets a lot of the time, which is not what we want, which actually segues me perfectly into the next thing, related thing I wanted to talk about, was that, the amount of people that I see playing kind of like, I put this tweet out today where I said, the amount of people I see playing Cowboy with large sums of crypto by storing it in a MetaMask wallet is mind-blowing. And I said meta redacted here because if you say MetaMask, you get bloody spam with kind of scam bots. And then I said, seriously, get a hardware wallet. Don't wait until something bad happens to do it. If there's one piece of wisdom I can impart on kind of like all of you, is that you need to get a hardware wallet. Keeping anything in a hot wallet where it's kind of like not stored on a physical device and you don't have to physically sign it is really, really bad news, guys. I'm sure you've seen the countless kind of stories on Twitter about people getting their MetaMask drained. There's multiple ways it can happen. One of the ways that it can happen that unfortunately a hardware wallet wouldn't kind of wouldn't protect you against unless you checked what you're signing is man-in-the-middle attack, where essentially you could you could have generate a transaction, right? Say you're doing kind of like a send. Say you're sending ETH to someone, you generate the transaction, but what can happen if there's malware on your PC? Essentially, what happens is that the malware injects a different transaction into your MetaMask, and it displays that to you, and you unwittingly sign that transaction and like process it and send it out into the world, thinking that it was your transaction that you kind of like initiated. And that is, as I said, what's called a man-in-the-middle attack, and that is how a lot of people lose their funds. Now, unfortunately, a hardware wallet will only protect you against this if you actually check what you're signing. So once it goes to the hardware wallet, you can see on your little screen details about the transaction, but a Ledger Nano S or X will not really show you anything because the screen's so small, and a lot of the time they'll show you a little bit, but and then some of the time they won't show you anything. So it's really, really crappy from that perspective as well. But what a hardware wallet will do is it'll basically keep your funds really safe and secure on there instead of it being kind of like on your PC where malware can get into your MetaMask and do other nasty stuff with it as well. And on that note of kind of like signing transactions and being able to see it, this is why I love the Lattice One hardware wallet from Grid Plus. And this is not kind of like a plug or anything. I'm not getting paid to say this, but this is why I love their hardware wallet, because it actually gives you a full-size screen, which allows you to basically see what you're signing on it, like see the whole kind of transaction and confirm that you're actually signing the transaction that you originally intended to sign, not something that someone has injected. So that's a good way to keep safe. But also, the number one thing that you need to do when you're setting up a MetaMask or a hardware wallet or anything is your seed or secret phrase, as it's known, that needs to never, ever, ever touch any type of digital kind of like thing ever. Like, don't put it in your phone, don't put it on the PC, don't save it to a text file, don't put it, don't email it to yourself, don't do any of that sort of stuff. Write it down on a piece of paper temporarily, and then kind of like secure it even more than that. So write it maybe. If you have to write it down on a physical kind of like piece of paper, put it in a book to protect it or something like that, or put it in a safe, or put it in kind of like, or split up the seed phrase or the secret phrase as well, and make sure that that's kept safe. Or you can get these kind of like metal sheets. You can buy them online that are basically fire resistant, kind of like electrical shock resistant, water resistant, where you can kind of like input your seed phrase into that. But once you do that, those 12 or 24 words, if an attacker gets access to those, they can drain your entire wallet, and not just one wallet, all the wallets associated with that. So that is what you need to protect at all times. And as I said, you need to never put that on your PC or any type of digital kind of like area. And the reason why a lot of people actually get compromised is because they go to a phishing website that asks them for their seed phrase or their secret phrase, and they put it in. Never, ever, ever, guys. Never. And the thing is that, like, I say this and then people ask me, well, what if I have to like restore my MetaMask wallet on a fresh kind of like PC build using my existing secret and a seed phrase? And I'm like, well, I mean, I can understand that, but at the same time, you shouldn't be using MetaMask as kind of like a kind of like a hot wallet for anything more than like a small amount of money. All your addresses and your seed phrase should be tied to your hardware wallet, because you can do a pass through. Like, as I was explaining before, MetaMask works with Ledger. You can basically pass through your Ledger, all the wallets on your Ledger device to your MetaMask, and then do the whole kind of like transaction flow instead of generating a wallet on MetaMask and storing funds in there. So from that perspective, because the hardware wallet device gives you the seed phrase on the actual device, not on your computer, not on anything networked, you get it on there once, you write it down on a physical piece of paper, and that's it. And you kind of like put it into that metal sheet thing, or secure it some other way, and that's it. That never ever touches anything ever again, except if you want to restore into a new hardware wallet. Of course, you can do that as well, where you can input your seed phrase into a hardware wallet, but never put that online or anything. I literally can't stress this enough, guys. I've seen so many people kind of like get tricked into this. That is basically the key to your kingdom. That is the key to everything that you have, and you won't even notice that it's gone by the time it happens, because it'll happen very, very quickly, because it's an automated process a lot of the time, where they take in the seed phrase, they use a piece of software to run it against the thing. Then they'll probably have a bot set up to quickly drain all the ETH and popular tokens out of it. And then you might have some other tokens and NFTs that they don't know about. And then when the attacker goes to manually review them, they'll get those as well. So be very, very careful out there, guys. You don't want to be a victim of this. It'll definitely be the shittiest thing that will ever happen to you if you get kind of like attacked and your funds stolen, especially if you've been stacking for quite a while. I would hate for that to happen to any of you. So yeah, heed my warnings, get a hardware wallet if you don't have one. That's like step one, basically. And make sure that your seed or secret phase is not on your computer or anything like that. Make sure it's only on kind of physical piece of paper or one of those metal sheets. But yeah, I think I'm going to end it on that note for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.